Hello and welcome to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time and how to spend it. I'm Felix Schultz.
And I'm Andy Green. Felix, how you going, mate?
Pretty good. Still enjoying the summer of 2024, aka new beginnings.
It's got a fresh start. Speaking of fresh starts,
yes.
What's going on? What's been happening? What are we in for this week?
I'm just dropping stuff at my desk and making awkward microphone noises. Apologies to anyone hoping to experience this in surround sound. We are chatting to, well, not we, I'm not chatting to Verne Ho. You're chatting to Verne Ho, who I think has rapidly escalated into one of your fave online content creators in the watch space.
Of all time. Yeah, he's great.
Of all time.
I don't know. Maybe. He's great. Yeah, you called in sick.
Yeah, well, yes. There was some, let's say, administrative oversight.
Annual leave. I'm not sure how the HR team approved it, but we let you off.
Yeah,
this
watch
time.
Studies. We should say watch studies on Instagram, Andy. That's who Verne is when he's not being Verne.
When he's not Verne, he's turning watch photography into art and educational. Yes, I catch up with Verne. It was great, sort of like 45-minute chat. We'll get into that in a minute. But before we do, Felix, what have you been up to?
Well, what have we been up to, Andy? Because we, we've been pumping the old the old Discord, but we'll get to that in a second.
Always.
We're on a new platform, Andy. We're on Substack, which we've been talking about a bit. We'll put a link to it in the notes of show. But we are sort of working out what to do with it. Like we send out episode, show notes maybe for every 2 episodes. I don't want to spam bomb everyone.
Yeah, little catch-up eps.
Yeah, what you might have missed. But we also got around to doing a review of a Zodiac. So they sponsored us a few weeks ago, and they sent us a watch to check out. So we thought we'd check it out and share the thoughts. You took some exceptional photos, and I wrote some middling
exceptional words. A little freebie for Zodiac. You're welcome. I think it went well. We got some good eyeballs on it. We got a few.
Yeah. And it's such a nice little platform. Like I use WordPress for Revolution, and you got to resize the images, you got to do this, you got to mess around with HTML. This is like full drag and drop. It's great.
Yeah, I think it sort of reflects what we're thinking for 2024, season 5 of OT.
Yep,
it's been a long run. Less is more. That's where we're at.
Less is better.
Less is better. More is less, and part of it is doing more with what we have. So we get access to these watches, opportunities. Sometimes we don't really have a place for them. Let's create a place for it.
Yeah, like I don't think we're going to be Hodinkee 3.4.
No.
But a nice little newsletter of people that are interested in our thoughts seems like a good place to go into that more formal sort of traditional watch reviewing space. Also, I mean, as we listen to this, I will have been and went to Geneva for a pre-Watches and Wonders preview with Von Cleef and Arpels. I think I can say that. And I might just do a little sort of wrap on Substack of just a couple of photos from the phone roll. Like, this is what I can share. This is what the workshops were like, all that sort of stuff. So.
Well, I think that'll be good for taking some stuff out of the podcast as well, so we can kind of tighten up what we put in.
Yeah.
Add to it. And add to it with other things and open up new opportunities. But I think it's a good growth opportunity for us because we've been talking about this, about, kind of dropping the frequency of the episodes. Maybe it's not every week, maybe it's every fortnight, maybe it's 3 episodes a month, but exploring new things with the podcast. So one thing we're looking at is video. How we make that work.
More on video later, but as always, the other one that we explored it early on, and it's still popping off, is Discord. Again, interesting discussions, and not always planning to do the thing of generating content from the crowd, but really interesting discussion there about someone who was like leveling up to a gold watch, and other people talking about divesting and like the sort of the feelings around that, and always that conversation of like, you've got a lot of money in something, or you've put a lot of emotional investment into something. How do you feel about getting rid of it, or starting afresh? All that, which was a really meaty discussion, and one I find endlessly fascinating.
I also made a rare contribution to the airplanes chat. that channel.
Andy.
Did you see?
I did, yes. The green gremlin or something.
Yeah, wild. So it was this, the New Guinea Gremlin Special Rescue, 1945. This plane went down somewhere that you couldn't land a plane, and there were some survivors, and so another plane like flew over and saw them. Long story short, they sort of dropped in like glider type deals.
Yep.
And then had like a plane snag them.
Like skyhook it out.
Tow them, and then they kind of paraglided off. Super weird. But yeah, I was able to add to the aeroplanes channel.
Yep, it's a strong aviation chat.
It is heavily, there's a lot of aviation boys and girls in there. But it's a good time. Yeah, I like the Discord. It's sort of just another way to stay engaged.
It's that old. I mean, it's less sort of. It's a smaller community, and it's less BS and the big Facebook groups, and it's that old watch forum vibes really.
Yeah, it sort of does remind me of 2015, 2016.
Yep, C61.
Yeah.
Just still kicking, by the way. I don't know if you're going well. Shout out to those guys.
Yeah, Cal 61.
What's been going on? So that's the business side of it. What about the pleasure, Andy?
You want me to start, or you want to start?
I've got a quick one.
Yep.
I'll knock that off. I've been watching, we've got Amazon again, and I've been watching season 2 of Good Omens.
Yep.
So David Tennant stars like David Tennant.
Who's that? It's a Doctor Who joke.
Oh, okay. David Tennant, noted English or Scottish actor, Scottish, apologies, who has a hilarious wife on the internet. He's wearing a watch. He plays a devil. Guess what sort of watch he wears?
Devil is wearing a Hublot.
Close, Frank Mueller.
Oh,
I want that to be like, that is the most perfect low-key sort of prop placement ever.
Casablanca?
I don't know. I only saw the profile. It looked like a Curvex, like a Vanguard or something.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. What have you been up to?
So last few weeks, I finally gave up and gave in. I submitted to Apple TV's #1, most popular show / movie, Slow Horses. For me anyway, I don't know if you have something different, but for the last 3 years of having Apple TV, it's always been Slow Horses at #1. And I don't know, we all do it, but I did the thing of, no, I don't want to watch it. It's probably all hype. I'm not going to.
Yeah, I'm anti-authoritarian.
For no reason, for absolutely no reason. Got through it, opened the first episode, 50% slow.
50% horses?
Yeah, horses. And then it just hooked me. And it is the exact thing, kicking myself, exact thing that I would enjoy. But it's basically it's a spy thriller based on a series of books that sort of first came out maybe a decade ago.
Sure.
Mick Herron's the author. I think he's done 5 or 6 books now. There's 3 seasons with another 2 confirmed. So they've...
juicy. Good for a binge.
It is good for binge. They're sort of 6 episode seasons, about an hour
limited
each.
Release.
So it is limited, but I'm obsessed.
You know what? I've seen it, but I think it's, for me, it's like, it kind of feels like I don't know anything about it except the title. And for me, the title, it feels like, I don't know, there's probably a UK series about retired cops that are a bit old and past it and come back for one last. It's got sort of that quirky comedy vibe that I suspect is not it.
It's totally inaccurate. You're right. So and the imagery, it's this old sort of, it's Gary Oldman. He
plays a great spy.
Well, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think Apple TV, they're banking on people going Gary Oldman, which I think is probably a bit too niche, especially for, I'm going to say, younger sort of audiences.
Fair, yeah.
The artwork, he kind of looks like a homeless Gary Oldman. So yeah, you don't know what it is. You don't know what it's about. I've never really seen anything about it. I didn't know the books until the series.
Yep.
So I don't know that it's, and rich of me to say, but I don't know that it was marketed that well towards me, at least.
Sure. Yeah, I'd agree. Like, if I thought this was like sort of gripping spy thriller, like Slow Burn, I'd be there. But Slow Horses sounds like Only Fools and Horses.
Oh, it's incredible. It's high quality Reacher. Like, it's Reacher with all of the substance.
Yeah. Did you ever watch Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy?
Yeah.
Gary Oldman.
Exactly. So he's fantastic in it. The suspense, the drama, the story, the twists, the turns. It is, I'm going to read the books, of course, but it is very, very good. In a way, I'm glad I waited this long because I did get to sort of enjoy 3 seasons pretty quickly. Sure. But obsessed. Slow Horses, it's very good.
Good rec. Hey, I've got another one for you. You might be a bit young for this. Did you ever watch Spooks?
No.
So incredible 2000s, I'd say, BBC, like British crime sort of show. It has an incredible cast. Like anyone has been in this show before they were cool. Matthew McFadden, Kit Harington, Keely Hawes, really, really like the people who are now in everything were all in this sort of kind of like 24, but British and a little less American, series. Another spy rec for people before we get into the interview for today.
British spy films and TV shows have just... I forget, I grew up watching The Bill and loving The Bill. So
me too. I still wonder about how Reg's Garden goes sometimes.
I need to track The Bill down. Every week we're talking about British crime shows now.
That's what you do in your summers. Anyway, I'm going to step out now. I'm going to hand over the reins of the slow horses to you.
Let's get Verne on. I give him a great introduction.
Okay.
Today's guest is someone I've been internet pals with for years now. More importantly, he's a jack of quite a few trades, from web design, startups, even I think hospitality, and of course photography. He's got his fingers in many pies and on many Shutter releases. Verne Ho, as you might know him, Watch Studies. Welcome to OT.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to finally be here and be able to chat with you face to face.
Amazing. You've been busy. You were busy over the pandemic, which is, we were just chatting offline, which was when we sort of connected. I think that was when you really stood out to me, showing off kind of your office setup, and it was pretty clear you had some skills and maybe a bit of OCD.
Oh yeah, I mean that, and I just spent a lot of time on video calls, as we all probably did, especially during the pandemic, and so for something that you were going to spend about 10 to 12 hours staring at all day long, like it just made sense to invest in the right equipment, get the lighting set up so your eyes aren't going to be all tired and everything, get the camera set up and all that. And yes, the rest of it is just OCD, just wanting to make things perfect to my own personal standards just for me, because really most people didn't really care how it looked on their end of things, but to me it mattered.
The attention to detail was what stood out to me, because I think you did like a floor plan of your home office, which it's over the top, but I love it. And so you talked through the lighting and the different accessories, and at that point in time I'd never really kind of worked from home, and it wasn't something I'd even considered. And then there's this guy on the internet, and I'm sure there's others, but had just really considered all of this detail down to, not using a webcam or the built-in webcam, but plugging in a proper camera to kind of really capture nice audio, nice video. And of course, that's what everyone has gone on to do in subsequent years. Where did that attention to detail kind of in your life come from?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, over the top is sort of like definitely the nice way to say it. It's a bit of a sickness and it takes over. I tell people I have no hobbies. I only have obsessions. Mm-hmm. And so anything I do, I tend to accidentally go 200% on. And if I can't, then I almost don't do it at all. The other thing is that like a good friend of mine once told me that I'm a documenter. Like I just have this inherent need to document things in my life that I'm working on, sort of always in the spirit of putting it back out there and helping. And I feel like so much of my career and so much of what I've been able to accomplish has been through the support of people around me and the resources that people put out and the kindness that they offer. And so anytime that I'm learning something new, anytime that I'm tackling a new craft, a new task, I do my best to sort of document it and put it down into words so that I can actually share it back out. And so that's kind of where that comes from. Mm-hmm. And why I ended up writing that blog post about, how I put together my home office, because it was a strenuous process and it took a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, a lot of trial and error. But it was also a really fun process. And so documenting it is also part of the fun for me, taking the before and the after photos, thinking through the decision making, and documenting like even all the products that I've considered. And if that can go forward and help a handful of other people accelerate their decision-making process to achieve the same goals, that makes me really happy. And that's been sort of a common thread across everything that I've done, through design or, home decor and in photography now. It's all sort of in the spirit of helping other people do similar things. I tend to just create things that help other people also create more of their things that they love.
Yep.
And that's sort of always going to be the kind of the key mission behind anything that I do.
Yeah, well, I think there's something interesting that you said was, these little things matter. Even the screen resolution, that was something that I can't believe I made it to my 30s without appreciating how important, high quality screens were for,
Right.
like you said, 10, 12 hours at least if you're not, degenerate that's gaming like me or, watching Netflix, but investing in that stuff matters. And it's sort of,
Yeah.
it's a different approach, I think, to health, and I found that's what I found quite interesting. The ergonomics of things, the chairs, the even the way natural lighting comes in, and I mean that leads me to my next point. That was sort of how we met at the time.
Right.
I do remember you talking about watches and how you were kind of into watches. You'd been probably 5 years, sort of quite interested in watches, but you were talking about sort of applying it into watches, and I guess that's where watch studies came up.
Yeah, so watch. I've always been fascinated by watches, and I've had watches around me in one way or another, like through my entire life. Like my growing up, my brother had G-Shocks, and I just thought that they were the coolest watches ever.
They're pretty cool.
And I could never have my own, but I could at least like idolize the G-Shocks that my brother would have. And that was my definition of cool. And then of course, kind of growing up, getting my first job and everything, and having a little bit more disposable income, you go through the inevitable like kind of fashion watch stage where you're trying to figure out your personal style, who you are, and everything, and you choose the accessories and things that sort of reflect that. And there was that kind of chapter, and then yeah, I eventually got my first luxury watch as sort of as a way to commemorate I guess a business or a career milestone. We had just sold our design studio. My business partner and I, my best friend and I, had just sold our design studio that we had been running for almost 5 years to Shopify. And we actually went many years after the acquisition without commemorating anything. Like we didn't do anything special with it. And then we found ourselves at an IWC boutique a couple of years later, and we said, "Hey, we never did anything together to commemorate this major life-changing milestone." And it was one of those things that you do with your best friend, which is like, if I do this, you'll do this, right? Like if I buy a watch today, you're going to buy a watch with me. And so we did that, and we walked out that day with two watches. And I picked up the Engineer W125 chronograph, not knowing really anything about the brand, about the watch, or anything at all, besides the fact that it spoke to me aesthetically and stylistically. But that was the beginning of sort of the end in terms of getting me into watches. As I brought that home and I looked up, what the watch was about, what IWC was about, I really, really, really got hooked. And so that was my first kind of luxury watch. But that was kind of the beginning of this particular chapter. And trying to get back to the question that you're asking me, but I have always been taking photos on the side as well. I was also a street photographer and kind of like a travel photographer for many years. But when 2020 hit, it was the pandemic. I had my daughter, so I became a dad for the first time. So I really wasn't traveling, and I wasn't even going outside. And so what I ended up doing was turning my camera inwards towards one of my other passions, which was watches. And I started taking just random photos of the watches that I had at the time, and writing little stories about it. And really, the watch that kind of kicked it off for me was the Cartier Santos that I had done to commemorate my daughter's birth. And so, that watch was really special to me, and I picked it for a very specific reason, and I wanted to tell that story. And it was just as simple as that. And so I started learning how to take photos of that watch, and then writing a little story on my personal blog. And that's kind of what created the itch that eventually became watch studies, many months later.
Amazing. So it sounds like you're the kind of person who likes an occasion to tie it into a watch. But how do you kind of come to those decisions? Because that IWC mentioned as a first kind of serious or a first luxury watch, that's quite a jump. Cartier Santos, again, it's a massive brand, but it's sort of very enthusiast choice, and it sounds like you made these. Well, I'm going to ask you, why did you choose those watches as opposed to the watches people kind of typically kind of jump for as their first sort of luxury brand?
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, when I chose those watches, I knew nothing about what people typically chose as those, as milestone watches, right? Like, yes, I was very well aware of what Rolex was, and and sort of all the stereotypes that go with choosing a Rolex to commemorate a milestone and all that. But beyond that, I had no real sense of like specific models or anything. I just really wasn't as tuned into the watch community and industry at that time. And so I kind of chose it somewhat blindly and naively. And now looking back, very luckily, what had happened is with Santos in particular was that my daughter's name is Atlas, and we had chosen that name for her long before she was born, and long before we were even expecting her. But we knew, my wife and I knew, that that was going to be the perfect name for our first child, because it sort of captured the essence of travel, which was such a critical piece in defining who my wife and I were, together and separately. Travel had been such a big part of just in our formative years, and had helped us learn so much about who we wanted to be, who we were. And so we just felt like Atlas was a beautiful name. My wife and I also essentially got together in San Francisco, even though we're both from Toronto, and we found ourselves in the same city through completely different reasons. So again, it was sort of this serendipity of like travel bringing us together. And so that's what the name Atlas really kind of refers to. And so when I was thinking about what watch would commemorate her birth, I wanted it to be along the same vein. And so I started looking at, like GMTs and pilots watches and things like that. And the reason why I ended up going back to Cartier and the Santos in particular was, Cartier at that point, I had already developed a relationship with them. They were who I ended up going with when it came to choosing an engagement ring when I was proposing to my wife. And I met somebody there that essentially, even to this day, has been by my side, helping me celebrate every single like major family milestone. It was just kind of like that relationship that I had built with the local boutique in San Francisco that brought me back to Cartier again. And truth be told, I didn't know anything about the Santos up until that point, and I'd never even looked at any watches until that moment. And as I looked further into it, and I learned about the history of the Santos and the fact that it was this pivotal piece in humans pioneering flight, everything just kind of clicked in. And it just resonated with me immediately. And so the Santos just became that perfect watch to represent what Atlas represented. So much so that, 2 years later, when we had our son, whose name is Jet, I got a second Santos, also in steel. And I'm pretty sure I'm like one of the very few people that have a Santos in steel, both in large and in medium, in the collection. But both of them will also leave the collection probably in 18 years or so as the kids grow older. They're meant to be passed on to both of them, and that's why they exist in the collection, and that's why they're actually really special to me and one of my favorite watches that I wear daily almost.
Which size do you prefer?
Right now, the medium. But I bought the large first and wore that like literally every day for 2 years, and then I've been wearing the medium a lot more, and I expect that over my lifetime that will continue to go back and forth. I think it fluctuates based on just stylistic preferences and fashion, and all of that stuff is very cyclical. I find myself still wearing the large depending on what I'm, how I'm dressed and what I'm wearing. It's all about the proportions. If I'm wearing a big hoodie and that's a little bit baggier, the large actually feels appropriate. But if I'm gonna wear, if I'm wearing just t-shirt and jeans, actually like the medium actually feels more proportionate.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the beauty of the Santos in particular is that you can sort of rock the medium all through the extra large, and you might not think, you might have a wrist that suits the medium, but you'd be able to pull the extra large off. Like it wears so well, especially, I mean, I'm such a big fan of the Santos Dumont. I can't wait for the day that I actually get one.
The short lugs on the Santos just make it wearable. Like, and that's one of the most common DMs and comments I get anytime I post the medium and large, or anytime somebody catches wind of the fact that I have both of them, they'll inevitably shoot me a message and be like, I'm thinking about the Santos. Which one do I get? And the answer is still, it depends. You should go try them on, but you should know on a 6.25-inch wrist, both of them fit very well. Both of them wear very well.
Amazing. Okay, so that's the watches. That's how you got into watches, but Watch Studies is so much more than, you know, a couple of Cartiers and an RWC. It's a business. It's a lifestyle.
Right.
It's your full-time thing at the moment. When and how did this happen? Because I remember seeing sort of right up in the lead up to New Year's Eve, you know, you're breaking 200,000 sort of Instagram followers. Like, you've just exploded, and for good reason, right? Like, my take is, you know, and sort of the stuff we've talked about, but you put the effort in, and I think that's really standing out at a time when there's a lot of like quick content. There's a lot of kind of fast, maybe throwaway, trashy kind of TikTok style content. And then you're still kind of working really hard to add value. But tell me about Watch Studies.
Yeah, Watch Studies was in the beginning very much so just a hobbyist outlet for me. I left my post in Shopify at the end of 2020, December 2020. And I promised myself that I would try to do nothing for as long as I possibly could, because I haven't ever done nothing ever in my entire life. And it took all of 2 weeks for me to walk into the kitchen one day and ask and tell my wife, or, you know, implicitly ask my wife whether it was okay if I started a watch Instagram account, and I needed to just gauge how insane that sounded. And, you know, of course, my wife was immediately like, yeah, go for it, do it. And so I did. And then I realized I'm not the only crazy one. There's actually a lot of people that have watch specific Instagram accounts.
Yeah.
And so I just started posting. And in the beginning, it was sort of just posting a photo of every watch I had in the collection, just kind of moving through the rotation. But as I did that, I also started to get fascinated and obsessed with sort of the nuance of watch photography and how it differed from any photography that I had ever done before. You know, in many ways, it shares a lot of the same principles in street photography and architectural photography, but it just has its nuances that play a big role in helping the main subject, in this case, the watch, really shine. And I started getting really fascinated about that, and it was my own curiosity of wanting to get into that and like figure out how it was done and how I could do it better, combined with my inherent sickness to want to always share everything that I'm doing. And so I think it took me maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before I put out a post. I was like,
yep,
this is how I shot this photo. And I just kind of quickly documented. I don't remember what it was, but I documented essentially, I think maybe the setup of a shot, what kind of lighting I used. I might not have even had actual lighting at that point. I might have used window lighting or something like that. But I essentially just broke it down. I'm like, hey, if you wanted to do a shot like this at home, this is what you should do. And I kind of just fell back into that same thing that I love to do, which is document things that I'm learning about. Because if I think it's fascinating, somebody else out there must also find it fascinating. And that was sort of the genesis of what of what Watch Studies was going to become in the years to come after that. And so today, the way that I would describe Watch Studies is it's the only dedicated resource for watch photography tools and tutorials for enthusiasts. Or more plainly, it's about helping watch enthusiasts tell better stories about the watches that they love. And that's really what it's about. I realized very early on that watches, people that collect watches have stories to tell. You'll be hard pressed to go up to anybody with an interesting watch on their wrist and not have them talk your ear off if you ask them about what that watch is and why it's important to them. And I think that's so cool that these things aren't just like products of design and engineering, but that they are meaningful, sentimental objects that serve a role and that commemorate many different things for different people. But the thing is that not everybody has the right tool set to tell that story in an interesting way, but everybody wants to tell that story in a more interesting way. And that's what Watch Study sort of exists to help support. It's to give people the right tools, in this case, the right photography tools, to go and tell their story about the watches that are meaningful to them.
Yeah, and I think that's quite interesting. People do have stories and they do struggle to tell it, but what you've applied is those little details that matter. And, kind of looking at the website, you've got heaps of guides, you've made YouTube tutorials, and they're not 10, 15 minutes. You've got like 1 minute tutorial to kind of show the one thing that you're kind of educating people on. And we'll link up the website. Talk to me about the business side of it. So you're doing a lot of work with Deluxe, but this is like a full-time thing for you. How and when did that happen?
Yeah, it happened gradually.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said in the beginning, it wasn't the plan. It was just a thing to kind of fill the time to do a big mental break and just be a little creative outlet on the side. But I also find it interesting to make the most out of anything that I do and be very pragmatic about the things that I do. And the concept of like freelancing as a designer, that was very close to home, and that's how I kind of started my career in the design field. And so that was sort of the first natural path that I took with watch studies. Coming out of Shopify, I had this like burning desire to continue to serve the underdogs, the small brands, the independent brands, the ones that didn't have the in-house photographer and the brand managers and all that, but it was just one person that was kind of struggling to build a company, a brand, and put out great products. And so I really wanted to help with those people. And that's kind of what I did in the beginning, was just reach out to small independent brands and offer them my photography services, and essentially say, hey, I know how to take photos. You have great watches. Let's work together and let me arm your marketing with better imagery that you can use to help sell your watches and get your watches in front of more eyeballs. So that was kind of the beginning business model of watch studies. And I think it wasn't until maybe a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that, that I started to understand that, especially as my audience started to grow, the value was not just in the imagery that I could create for other brands, but it's for that brand to get their products in front of my audience, mm-hmm. which was starting to become more engaged than the brand's audience. So for them, they just wanted to get other enthusiasts that were very engaged in watch related content, seeing the products. And so started understanding that there was a sort of a business model around producing content, and representing brands and putting brands' products inside of my feed, while still staying true to my own mission of educating and inspiring watch enthusiasts to tell richer visual stories around watches that they love. And so today, that's primarily kind of the business model behind watch studies. It's working with brands to create interesting content. And I stand pretty firm around the idea that I will never change my tone of voice and turn into, I will never change kind of the mission of what Watch Study stands for and what it's for. So you won't see me just kind of pivot and just randomly do a watch review. Mm-hmm. Everything I show is just about telling stories around watches that I truly care about and that I'm passionate about. And I find very authentic and organic ways to kind of integrate brand products into that.
Amazing. And so what was that in transition like for you, sort of monetizing this hobby along with the growth? Because it was from the outside, it looked like it kind of happened pretty quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't describe it as it happening really quickly. It's a lot of trial and error.
Sure.
And I think one of the inherent struggles with trying to be a content creator in the watch industry is that it's a fairly new model for the watch industry as a whole, right? You don't see, it's not the same as, say, the food industry or the fashion industry. And so this concept of pitching a brand to work with the creator to create content isn't something that everybody is immediately open to. And it's still sort of a slow process, but many more brands are coming around to it, especially a lot of the more independent micro brands. I think they're more open to it. And so it's been sort of a slower process in trying to figure out how to work with brands and how to introduce the concept into them, while at the same time trying to figure it out on my own. Because even though I've been on Instagram for a while and I've run my personal account for a very long time doing street photography, I've never done content creation as a full-time thing. And so I leaned a lot on even just friends in other industries who are kind of doing the same thing to really get the ins and outs of like, what does it mean to partner with a brand? What's a collaboration look like? So on and so forth. So it was sort of it's been a learning process on both fronts. And that's why to me, it's actually kind of it's been a slow process, and I'm still figuring it out, and the industry is still figuring it out. We're all trying to figure it out. And I think one of the best things that have come out of some of the strongest partnerships that I have is the willingness for both of us to come at it and say, let's figure out the best way to do this together, and let's continue to evolve it and iron it out, with sort of a soft goal of trying to figure it out on behalf of the industry even, right? How do we set the path so that more creators can get involved and more brands can find new ways to work with creators and unlock new ways to like new platforms essentially to engage with their customers through.
You're spot on there. It's still a relatively new concept to the industry, and I mean, there's also only so many watch brands that you can work with and that have the appetite to work with. Yeah, with creators. I mean, that was something we've always sort of struggled with at the various places I've worked and Felix has worked, and we often talk about is, it's a massive industry and there's a lot of money, in and around it, but actually sort of tapping into that is incredibly difficult. So it's amazing. It's amazing that you've been able to sort of go full time and turn it into something quite great. So we've just ticked over into the new year, 2024. What can we expect from Verne this year?
That's a good question. I don't even think I've gone through the personal exercise of doing resolutions or like mapping out a sort of a plan for the year. One of the things I'm constantly doing is evolving the way that I can deliver tutorial, like my content in general. But at the heart and soul of it is really just the tutorial content and trying to understand what is the best way to do that. In 2023, I pivoted my tutorial content from long form blog style content that I had on my website to short form tutorials on Instagram, mostly via carousel posts or reels. And that was a very positive change. I found a lot more engagement and I was able to really just connect with my audience more directly that way. It's one step closer to where the community is actually at versus the whole link in bio, click through, etc. And so that's kind of really interesting to me to think about how I can like further evolve that in 2024. How do I cover more of the topics that are really interesting to people and less of the ones that aren't as interesting? The topics themselves tend to get more specific as time goes on. When I first started, I could write like very broadly about like big topics. It's just like how to do a flat lay, how to do a pocket shot, that kind of a thing. Those are really kind of big meaty topics, and all in one, all encompassing, end to end. This is what you do. And now it's like I've gotten all of those out of my system, and now it's all about like the more specific things. It's like how do you spice up a pocket shot? Like how do you make it more enticing? How do you drive focus towards the right thing? How do you create more compositionally balanced photos? So they become a little bit more specific, but it's still geared towards the people that are, like the 0 to 1 photographers or watch enthusiasts, the people who are just at the beginning stage and just want to make that first step into it.
And they can benefit the most. Yeah, the sort of
exactly
the small sort of 1%ers. Amazing. All right, what's your favorite watch outside of your collection to photograph?
Oh, outside of my collection?
Yeah. Like, just what's the watch you've come across that just takes a lovely? We all have them. The watch that just struggles to take a bad photo.
Ooh, that's a really, really good question. I want to almost like pop it up in my feed to try to see like what things I've come across. I almost find that like the watches that I end up enjoying photographing the most, I end up just owning them.
Look, to be fair, the Cartier Santos is one of my favorites. I think
the whole Santos family in general, like all the Dumonts, and also just the Santos de Cartier are just phenomenal to photograph. They always come out and obviously they look great on the wrist. Oh man, I'm struggling. I might have to come back around. I'm trying to think.
All right.
What was a really great watch? You know what, the Seamaster World Timer, the Aquaterra World Timer in titanium is a watch that I got to shoot I think a couple months back, and that really surprised me because it's 43 millimeters, and it's kind of watch that I would just on paper I would have been like, nah, there's no way I'm interested in that. Like I wear 35, 36 millimeter watches. What's a 43 millimeter watch doing on my desk? And I had a ton of fun shooting that. I think it is such a beautiful piece, and it also actually wears surprisingly well for 43 millimeter. I think I could rock that with the right, right fashion decisions, but like I think it just has so many beautiful details to it, from like, the map engraved right onto the dial to even just the strap choice.
It's an interesting
that was
watch.
a really fun watch. And I did a focal length tutorial on that, which is all about, choosing the right focal length so that a watch doesn't essentially look larger actually is. And this is one of the biggest crimes that a lot of people accidentally commit. We take photos of watches with far too wide of focal lengths, and watches end up looking massive on our wrists, when in reality you're trying to convince, you're like, no, it doesn't look that big. I know it looks big on the photo, but it's not really that. And that's just because of the lens.
That's an education thing though. That's a really interesting, because that's something you don't, like, most people don't understand, even distortion that happens, and the disconnect between, it happens to people's faces, and with selfies in front versus back cameras on phones, but even with lenses, like, and it's something I didn't know for the longest time, was just about even just like a lens correction and using like some simple features within Lightroom to touch up.
There's definitely some things you can do in editing to kind of reduce that effect, but at a certain point, even just the visual proportions of a watch relative to your wrist is going to look massive. And the other hard part with a watch is that, so there's two things. One is every most default cameras on a phone is a wide lens. First of all, so most people are shooting with a wide lens without really realizing it's a wide lens. And secondly, the nature of a watch means that you're going to have to get pretty close, and the closer you are, the greater the effect of that distortion. And so as a result of that, trying to take a watch with this 43 millimeter Seamaster on my wrist using my iPhone camera, it's going to make the watch look bulbous on my 6.25 inch wrist, when in reality it actually wears much nicer than that. But yeah, when you in front of the right lens, that is a beautiful watch to shoot for sure.
Amazing. All right. Well, the last question we ask before we wrap, cautious of time, is for a recommendation. Sure. It's for, you've listened before, that we want something non-watch related. So it's just something you've been enjoying. It can be a book, it can be a movie, it can be a podcast, it can be an activity. As long as it's legal, we want to hear it.
Non-watch related.
Yeah, just something you enjoy that you think more people need to enjoy.
Can I cheat? Can it still be photography related?
It can be. Yeah. For sure.
I'm just trying to think of what's like top of mind. There is a really great account that maybe a lot of people have actually seen right now, but a guy by the name of William H. Baker. He's a photographer, and he does a whole bunch of videos that are in the theme of like how I lit this watch, or how I created this effect for a scene. And I think he like really took off with a video when he recreated like the explosion scene from Oppenheimer, but like with just homemade products, and he just shot it at home. Wow. And he kind of breaks down the process of how he does that. But he essentially, he goes and like captures like iconic scenes and that have like very specific aesthetics and lighting setups and all that stuff. And he kind of breaks it down as to like how he actually does it and with what setup and all that. And he does it in a really, really good way. Like, he's just a very concise educator, and clearly somebody who understands his craft very, very well. So his handle is
William.h.baker. Yeah, I found him.
And I've just been, he is way beyond my level of photography, but he's who I would aspire to get to from a craft level, especially when it comes to like managing light. So that's not exactly watch related.
Hey,
It's kind of a cheat because it is really.
It's a good shout. I mean, I could probably lose myself for an hour or two, and especially if he's got YouTube videos.
Yes.
Oh yeah, this is very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. I was going to say Felix and I, but Felix has been very quiet today. Thank you for joining me. It's been great to catch up.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, thank you so much for reaching out and having me. It's a real honor to be here, especially after so many years of just kind of being connected and at arm's length through the community.
Amazing. All right, chat soon.
Take care.
Well, there you have it, Felix. Verne Ho, Watch Studies, lovely fella.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
How do we know Verne's not in MI5?
We don't. And if he's good at his job, we'll never know.
Sure. Well, maybe we've blown his cover now. Maybe Watch Studies is going to disappear from the internet. Watches of espionage style.
I don't know. You're the guy going over to Geneva for what, 4 or 5 days at most, with no real clear purpose.
Business trip.
Yeah, I don't know how you explain that to anyone. I've got to jet over to.
Have I told you that? Like the only time Felix, solo white male, got properly sort of grilled at customs was on a 72-hour trip to America. I must have ticked enough like flags of like, because I had no carry-on either.
Yeah,
I only had
red flag.
carry-on.
That's the red flag. You'd be a terrible spy.
Yeah, I convinced them I was not a spy or involved in any illicit activity. Activity.
Support OT the podcast. Join our Substack. Join our Discord. Share it with your friends. Share everything with your friends.
Yeah.
Make sure you give us a 5-star reviews. Just get it out there.
OT.podcast on Instagram.
OTthepodcast@gmail.com. Email us your great recommendations and ideas.
Hey, here's an update. A last minute update. An immediate family member has validated the fact that Jean-Claude Biver sounds like my grandmother.
We need to get your grandma on.
She's dead.
That's going to be logistically tricky. We'll see you next week.